What is going down, my people? What is going down? Today, Plan B with Mr. Elk Spaghetti. Today is, I got my notes right here. Today is video 4, domestic protein, wild game, and the aging and butchering process. There's not a lot of people that have experience in this area. Some of y'all do, but some of y'all don't. What I will say is, for those of y'all that go, oh, I can never do that. You've had your hands inside of turkeys and dealt with raw chicken and beef from the stores. So change your mindset, your mentality. When you get in there, hey, it's all food. So set up these other little notes here because some of this shit I did not remember, and I wanted to give you guys hard timelines. Like I said in the last video, I grew up on a farm before my family moved out here to SoCal. It's been a hot minute since I've had to do some of this stuff, but on the wild game side, not so much. Like months. Other domestic side, like years. We'll get into chickens first. You always hear the big Puerto Rican talking about chicken at $9 billion. Chicken for the purposes of having, roasted chicken, chicken breast, chicken and different stuff. Probably not going to be feasible. And the reason that I say that is because for most of us, the scale that we're living on, even if we've got some acreage, we're not going to be able to maintain, feed, and protect enough chickens to be able to have them as table fare. Now, with that being said, you can't set up a hen house and have enough chickens, protect enough chickens, feed enough chickens to produce more than enough eggs to feed your family and then have enough to barter out for other stuff that you don't have on your little homestead property, whatever it may be. So going through the timelines of chickens, you're looking at about 22 weeks old before you start getting eggs out of them. So if you get with someone that does have chickens and you're buying chicks, you're looking at about 22 weeks, so just over right around 6 months before they start producing their own eggs. Now, what you need to take into consideration is your setup with your hen house. Protection. There's a lot of shit that are natural predators of chickens. They can smell them. They're problem solvers. So I'm not going to go through the list, but I will tell you, if you do not have a good varmint rifle, even your standard little 22 LR is going to get the job done. Some good optics and to be good with it, the ability to shoot at night, the equipment to do so, or good lighting, because that's when the majority of your predators are going to come in and snatch up and destroy everything that's going to be in your chicken coop. But you're going to want it protected from predators. You're going to want it protected from the environment. So whether it's cold weather or hot, proper ventilation, proper heating. You're going to want to keep your coop clean. It's one of the shitty parts about growing up or living on a farm or a homestead is cleaning up after livestock, because they start getting diseases and shit like that. Some of that nastiness, you'll never get rid of it. It'll destroy everything you got. So chickens, typically they'll make it 5 years, maybe a little bit longer for egg production. When the egg production falls off, they have lived out their life cycle. I don't let meat go to waste, but some people get attached to animals. I do get attached to animals as well, but I also understand that meat on the table could save someone's life. So you guys make that choice moving forward. We'll jump into pigs next. Pigs, 6 to 7 months is the average pig's life cycle. Unless you have a pig that's producing and you've got that process where you're producing piglets and you're pushing those out to other people that you know, 6 to 7 months, they're going from birth to 280 pounds market. So they're either going to go have other little piglets or they're going to make bacon and ham. Just saying, it's what it is. You guys have to be prepared with those timelines, because pigs, they're one of the dirtier animals to maintain, but they're delicious. So you have to be able to prepare for them properly. Nothing goes to waste in your house All your table scraps, everything like that, goes into a slop bucket out. You feed your pigs with it. Neither here nor there. You guys are looking at that 6 to 7 month timeline from birth to be able to have something you can market out, whether you're trading it for other items that you may need, or you're taking it over and having it butchered, or butchering it yourself to be able to provide different cuts of meat out to market or to be able to provide for your family. Now, we're gonna get into cows, but you have to keep an open mind on this. And I've never grown up and lived on a dairy farm because there's reasons that I'm not going to get into here. I don't do dairy myself, like milk. I can't. Knowing everything, y'all can research it yourselves. But when it comes to cattle for the purposes of field to fork, cuts of meat, ground beef, so whatever it may be, you're using everything that's involved in that butcher. You can age beef. Aged beef is delicious, but it's a process because it's going to take a walk-in cooler to do because you obviously, because of the size. You're looking at anywhere between 2 to 3 years from field to fork, and it's a process along the way. A lot of times in the cattle process, there's 2-3 steps in between birth and market. And there's people that specialize in each step along the way. So do some research into that if you're interested in that. There's a lot of people that have the dream of, oh, I'm gonna farm cattle. I'm gonna have cattle. You're gonna run into these exact same issues when it comes to predators. So be prepared. Be prepared to do a lot of work and then have those nights where you're going to have to take care of predators that are trying to get at your herd. And you also have to think, do you have the property size with the ground cover available to be able to feed those animals, or the feed supply that you can be able to bring in to be able to feed them, because you're going to want to fatten them up. But when you guys get into that, you'll understand exactly what it is I'm talking about. Dairy cows. This is the controversial portion. All I'll say is it is not feasible on a small scale. Not. A dairy cow has a 10-month lactation period, which means it has to give birth in order to have that lactation period. How the dairy farms do it on a commercial level, I don't agree with, but neither here nor there. A lot of people drink milk. I do not. But in order to have a dairy cow, you have to have a bull, you have to have birthings, and if you guys are taking the milk, what happens to the cow that was just born? You see what I'm saying? My advice is, instead of trying to maintain a dairy cow on your own properties, if you have acreage or whatever, is that you barter and trade for dairy products you may need, whether it's cheeses, so on and so forth. Goats also provide an excellent source of milk, but it's an acquired taste, so I'm not even going to get into there. You do not need... The human body processes milk very badly. It's just, we're not meant to digest that. So neither here nor there. You do not need that for survival. There's other ways to get your vitamin D, your calcium, so on and so forth. We'll get into some of the wild game. Duck, geese. Lou's going to kill me for that one. Pheasant, also known as ditch chicken. Delicious. Venison, elk, bear, antelope. These are all sources of clean proteins. So with your migratory game bird, with the duck, geese, there's seasons for it where they have the migration from north to south, and then they go back up for mating season. When it gets cold and it freezes over, they push south to the wintering grounds. That's where the warmer weather's at, down into Mexico, South America, so on and so forth. Understand those cycles, because you have a limited amount of time to be able to harvest what you need, and then be able to, if you're going to age, if you're not, if you're going to process into sausages, if you're going to breasts, so on and so forth. What I will tell you is, do not waste any of these birds, because even though it may not be table fare for your table, just about everything is processable for pig slop, dog food, so on and so forth. The only time you run into issues with bones in any kind of domestic animal or wild animal for dogs is when they're cooked. You got to remember, dogs were designed to destroy stuff out in wild, but bones become brittle and sharp and everything else and can fuck up a dog's insides when they're cooked. But when it's raw, like raw chickens, a dog could eat a whole raw chicken. Fuck them up. Don't cook your shit. Now, if you have, say, a duck that you breasted out, all the feathers and everything off it, because yes, you can use the feathers, especially on geese. I strip all the pin feathers off. I have a tumbler specifically set up for taxidermy and stuff like that, but full of sawdust. Clean all those feathers up. You can make pillows out of them. You can trade down to people that make blankets, quilts, jackets. It's a good source. Trust me, nothing should be wasted on these animals. But as long as the carcass doesn't sit where bacteria can develop, and you can grind that up straight into dog food, get that on refrigeration or get it preserved, it'll be outstanding sources of protein and vitamins for your animals moving forward. Enough said. Now we get into pheasant. Pheasant seasonal as well. You will find some of them in the snow sometimes. I personally, I love pheasant. I think pheasant's delicious. But this is one of those species that you can overhunt them. Which means if you hunt too much of them, there's not very many next year. So you got to be real careful with the sustainable source that you're hunting from, because you don't want to hunt them out, especially if your property or your area is only holding so many of them. So just be careful. Go out, do your research, look and see how many of them you're seeing out there before you decide to hunt. There may be seasons like I had a few years ago out here in SoCal. Went out and did a scout for gamble, like desert quail. And the holding capacity for the area, I wasn't seeing enough to justify going out and harvesting any quail. I was like, the predators are going after them as well. So you have to be able to maintain the species while you're harvesting from them. So if you're not seeing enough of them to justify taking some here and there, leave them alone. Let them recover. Maybe it was a hard year for water. It was a hard year for predators taking them out. But I won't get on the soapbox with that. That's the conservationist side of me. Venison. Understand how many people you've got that you're feeding within your small little family and what that's going to require. Because a lot of people will get too much of it. Either it sits in the freezer and gets freezer burnt, or it goes to waste. You don't want to do that. Typically, 1 deer per 2 adults a year. That's enough. If you're not eating copious amounts of protein every day. And it's a decent sized fucking deer anyways. So depending on your household, you're gonna harvest, and then like I said in the last video, this is what will completely destroy any kind of meat you got. Heat, moisture, dirt. So you combat that when you're harvesting, you're not gonna have any issues. Elk, 1 to 2 elk can feed a family for a year. I got a big family. 2 elk for me, we're eating good for the year. Because elk are going anywhere between 700 and 1,100 pounds. So it's going to be a family affair to be able to quarter and process that much anyways. But it's a really clean protein. Elk's going to be richer than venison. There's more fat in it, so you need less of it. You have too much of it, you end up, having gastrointestinal issues without getting into too much detail. Bear is an excellent source. We talked about it in the last video, rendering fat to be able to waterproof stuff, candles, fat to cook with. Also, when you do your duck and your geese, that's an excellent opportunity to render fat. Duck fat is some of the best fat to cook with in the world. Look at some of the culinary shows on the Food Network. There are a lot of people cooking with duck fat. But fat from a bear, typically you only need to harvest 1 bear a season. 1 bear a season, because bear goes a long way. You only need a little bit of bear for a meal. A little bit of bear. Stews, roasts, stuff like that, very, very excellent. Antelope. Antelope is excellent as well. There's not a lot of areas that hold it. So if you happen to be in an area that does have some antelope, antelope can be a little bit smaller than your average size mule or white-tailed deer. So tread softly. They're real quick. They are real skittish. So you got to be careful when you're out hunting those to be able to make sure that you're getting clean shots on them and you're harvesting an ethical shot on antelope. They'll be processed the exact same way as venison. So now that I've gone through those little notes there, we'll get into aging and processing. Aging for my wild game when it comes to venison, elk, bear, antelope. I got a cooler set up in my garage out there specifically for wild game processing. And after the shot, immediately go in my field. German short hair pointer, that's my bird dog. Immediately go into field where you're taking the stuff that's inside out. There's a way to do it that is a hell of a lot cleaner than how some other people do it. You got to make one cut, then you got to cut here, you got to cut here, and then everything else rolls out downhill. Now you can process some of the vital organs, whether it be the heart, stuff like the heart is actually really good. Some people do take the kidneys and the livers and stuff like that as well. I'm okay with the liver, but it's going to depend on the animal, the time of year, and what else that I'm seeing in contributing factors. The last thing you want to do is take organs from a sick animal. Some people don't like liver. Cool, got you. Neither here nor there. Use what you can for what it's worth, because some people do like it, so don't waste it in the field. Now, with that being said, that gut pile, that will serve your purpose. Get it away from where you're cleaning at. So once it's out, what you're doing is you're reducing heat in the animal. The animal's starting to cool. Get it back to your campsite, your house, wherever it may be. Hang it, skin it, and you're going into quarters. Hind quarters, hams. Top half, your other quarters. Tenderloins, back straps, go into the neck. There's a lot of meat in that neck that's used in stews and everything else. Really delicious meat. Ribs, you can cut those all down, rack them up. And you got look, I got a whole rack of ribs. You'll be able to throw those on a grill or a spit, some barbecue sauce, some mesquite rub. But then I take my 4 quarters and I hook them and hang them in my cooler. My cooler's sitting anywhere between 36 and 41 to 42 degrees, and I let them age in that cooler for 14 to 16 days. No more cuts outside of quartering them, so I got all 4 quarters hanging in there. The back straps, tenderloins, I do not age those. Those immediately get vacuum sealed up and stored. So 14 to 16 days, I pull all the silver, which for those of y'all that have worked with any kind of meat like that, it's a protective coating that's over the top of flesh. Sometimes you'll see it in beef when you get some of the larger hams, stuff like that. But it's stuff, when you start to cook, it gets pretty tough. So I'll pull the silver off the meat, real sharp knife, and I start cutting my steaks. I start cutting cubes, processing out my individual cuts for each of the 4 quarters. And then all the additional scraps, all that stuff comes off, goes into a scrap bowl, and that gets ground up with either some beef fat, some pork fat, some bear fat, and I make ground beef. It's actually ground venison, but it's some of the best fucking hamburgers you ever have. Once that's all processed, I use my food saver bags. I set it up by meal. If I got 4 people in the family, 4 steaks, you're looking at 2 to 3 ounce steak. Boop, 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 boop. 4 of them sealed up, good to go. So now when I take that out and thaw it, I'm not thawing stuff needlessly, because you don't want to have to refreeze stuff. It doesn't typically go well. But aged venison, aged elk, aged bear, all of it, it's going to take and break down all that gaminess that most of y'all are used to dealing with. When you have wild game and you're like, oh, I don't like that. Trust me, I've had some venison where I'm like, that's fucking nasty. I've had some bear where I was like, that's disgusting. I'll never eat that again. But Well, then when I use an aging process and you let those enzymes start to break down all the gaminess in that meat, you're going to do better off. But it all has to do with taking care of your game from the field to the cooler. As long as you keep it clean, you keep it dry, and you reduce that temperature as quick as possible, you're going to have great meat from the field to the table. Your family won't know the difference, and you're going to be able to provide them stuff that a lot of other people aren't going to have when there's not stuff available in stores. When they're eating lentils and you're over here making 3-4 ounce steaks with some rice or some mashed potatoes that you grew in your greenhouse, you're gonna be living like a king. Wild game is very, very, very nutritious, and it's very, very, very clean protein. You're not having a bunch of fucking antibiotics and a whole host of other shit that's pumped into domestic animals before slaughter, whether it be to increase size, to fight infection. You don't have to worry about none of that. What I will tell you on the wild game side is, please do your homework. Understand what's in your area. You do not want to hunt your herd out of existence. Now, with that being said, I will encourage each and every one of you, each and every one, Bass Pro Shops, contact your state's Fish and Wildlife department. Figure out how you can attend a hunter's education course, a hunter safety course, hunter's education course. It's all the same thing. I'm a hunter education instructor with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I will tell you, you will gain great skill and knowledge from that course when it comes to everything wild game related, whether it's tracking, whether it's identifying species, whether it's understanding your environment and where you're at, whether it's understanding, okay, hey, that's a buck, that's a doe. This is all stuff that's going to be important. You could need down the road. It's also going to, the instructor should be going through firearm safety, the different kinds of firearms, types of firearms, how to take ethical shots to be able to neutralize and harvest an animal immediately, as opposed to having to track and follow a blood trail. I don't like to do that. I'm an archery hunter for big game, but that's just because I am very, very, very good with a bow, and so are all my sons. There's additional courses you can take for archery hunting. Highly encourage those as well, because getting into somewhere where we may have little or no availability of certain stuff, ammunition, will probably be the currency of the day, like Ben was talking about on our space call the other night. So if you can get good with a bow, not only will you get some recreation time, but everything that you're flinging down range is recoverable and you reuse it. You can change out broadheads, you can go from mechanicals to fixed blades, but neither here nor there. You harvest animals with it, and you're going to be better off down the road. And it's a skill set that you can pass on to other people that don't have it, and maybe now you're trading that experience that you have with a bow or how to process wild game for something they may have, and you guys are going to be better off for it. So without further ado, that is all I have for today's video, and I hope y'all are doing fantastic and you guys are starting your week off right. I hope everyone has a glorious, glorious Monday, and I will catch you all next time. Mr. Spaghetti, signing off.